So today's topic is understanding anxiety. It's funny, when I tell people what I do of helping with mental health in schools, people who have utterly no clue will be like, oh yeah, like ADHD. Like, yeah, maybe 15 years ago, but right now in the current moment, but also right now 2 years ago, it's anxiety is what is really tying more people in knots than anything. So I have to disclose my conflicts of interest and my commercial bias. I've got no conflicts of interest or commercial bias. I was funded by a grant, now I'm funded by state funds, so I don't have any financial kickbacks coming from anyone. So on the evaluation, it asks, did I tell you I have no conflicts myself? Did I tell you my program has no conflicts? Yes, yes. And then it asks if there is any bias. They mean commercial bias when they ask that. Of course, I'm human, so there's any number of other biases. In this presentation, it's mostly biased in favor of being more compassionate towards kids with anxiety than we tend to. Oh, good, now it's working. And then additionally, I am so thrilled to be able to see people in 3 dimensions that I am not directly related to. So this is a delight. But of course, we do need to remember to do things as safely as we can. So just letting you know that to be heard at all, I need to speak without a mask. I am tested periodically. Just got my most recent result. I'm good today. And if anyone in the room ends up positive in the next couple of weeks, remember to have me be among the people that gets notified, along with any information you have about whether we ever came within like 20 feet of each other. So we start with a quote from a really cool website, healthyplace.com. Has all kinds of lovely posters like this. I wish they'd get back to me about copyrights on it. But anyway, this one I put up here actually because I disagree with it. So can anyone figure out what on there I quibble with? Okay, for those in the back, if you can't read it, it says, this is one of the most frustrating things about having an anxiety disorder. Knowing as you're freaking out that there's no reason to be freaked out, but lacking the ability to shut the emotion down. What do you think I think is just wrong about that? Call out anything. This is the beauty of real people instead of a webinar where I'm not sure whether people just logged in to let their computers collect the credit. Anything? Well, just to give you the answer, there's no reason. You know, but that's the first thing everyone jumps to. It's the first thing an anxious person says is, look, I know this is stupid, but I'm really scared of this. And the reason why they say that is because that's what they've been told all their lives, because everyone without an anxiety around that particular trigger thinks that the most reassuring thing to do is to tell the person how safe it is. You know, oh, that dog never bites anyone, or, oh, come on, this is totally fine. Which takes a person who's already in distress, they're already scared, panicked, whatever, and gives them the opportunity now to have the added bonus emotions of feeling stupid and like a wimp and ashamed. Because after all, clearly, there's no reason. And that's not the way the world works, okay? Anxiety is what it is. And we all can relate to some kinds of anxiety and not to others. And we need to recognize that we should be able to relate, you know, take the emotions you can understand and share them with someone else. You know, if someone's afraid of something that I think is silly to be afraid of, but I'm afraid of something else, I should be able to recognize that their thing is no more silly than mine. Like one really common one is heights. Lots of people are afraid of heights, okay? Now, a couple of years ago, I went to Peru. Anyone been to Peru? Peru is brilliant. I mean, they're really having a hard time now, but I went with my husband, and I highly recommend going to Peru. My husband and I went to Machu Picchu because you are required to go to Machu Picchu if you go to Peru. It's like required. And we signed up for a trek, and just by luck, I brilliantly managed to get a trek in which at least half of it was not walking. So we did some mountain biking and some rafting, and we did zip line. Now, has anyone done zip line? Anyone ever been on a zip line? Yeah, it's so cool because you go and they put all this gear on you, and you get up there and they clip you on a cable and you hold on and you lift up your feet and you try really hard to not think about the fact that you're in a country with no discernible safety regulations whatsoever that you've noticed. And you go across this really deep canyon. You're like, I did it, I'm alive. I'm on the wrong side of the canyon now, what do I do? And the guy who catches you is like, very goodness, clip here, clip on here, back the other way. You go back and forth and back and forth 5 times across this canyon. The 5th time, if you want, you can have them reverse the gear so you can do it face down. They call it Superman style. Now, if you've been counting 5 times, you're still on the wrong side of the canyon, right? So the 6th time to get home, they send you across what they very generously call a suspension bridge. What it is 5 more cables. The 2 along the bottom have boards attached to them by people with really long legs based on the excellent view of the canyon you get looking down as you go across these boards. And there's 2 to hang on to, and a 5th one that your gear is clipped onto, which is a little reassuring that you are still safety clipped in, and a little not reassuring because it totally points out that falling off this bridge is completely an option at any moment. So we're heading across this bridge, and I am between our new friend Marie and my husband Steve, both of whom have a fear of heights. And you did not need to know this about them because the bridge is vibrating from their fear as they're trying to cross this bridge. And when Marie got halfway across, she froze up. She could not take another step. Well, the staff had to like climb over all of us to go up there and step by step with her the rest of the way across. So very slowly with their help, we're moving across. We get a little bit farther out, and behind Steve, the next person that comes on from our group is, I have to call him a kid, even though he's 22, because he thought it'd be funny to bounce, maybe get swinging, see how much swing he can get going in this bridge. And I'm thinking, well, first I'm thinking, would my husband kill me if I unflipped myself, climbed over him, and went and slapped that dude? But you could like hear this kid thinking, oh, I'm not a scaredy cat like those people. I'm braver than that. And I'm just thinking, oh, dude, you are so not brave. You're cruel and you're an idiot. The one thing you absolutely are not is brave. I mean, did anyone watch Game of Thrones back when anyone hear of Game of Thrones? Okay, yeah, okay, you've heard of Game of Thrones. If you ever watched it in like the very first episode, there's this guy getting, it's getting beheaded. It's Game of Thrones. Okay, what do you want? And afterwards, the very young child who watched the beheading, it's Game of Thrones, turns to his father and says, my brother said that he was scared, but I thought he was brave. And now I'm wondering, is there any chance he could be both? And the father, who's very wise, don't get attached to him, turns to his son and says, you can only be both. Which is really what it's about. You can only be brave if you're scared. If you're not scared of anything, there's nothing to be brave about. Yeah, I did the zip line. I did Superman style. No big deal for me. I love heights. I was 30 feet up a tree when I was 2 years old. But Marie and my husband, they did it too. And I was so amazed and so impressed. When we got done, I wanted to throw them a parade. And they wanted none of that. They wanted to get out of the gear, crawl in the van, and hide because they were so ashamed of how scared they'd been, as opposed to being proud of what they'd accomplished. And so if you take nothing else away, you should take this. Because I treat lots of people with anxiety, and every time I ask them, do you have anything that you feel proud of? They never say yes. Like, why on earth not? You are fighting lions every day. And you take no credit for that. I'm like, well, because everyone else isn't scared of them. I'm like, but that does not mean they are small. And I asked all my clients, if she'd done anything brave. And she said she did zip line. I'm like, how was it? And she goes, oh, I loved it. It was so much fun. I'm like, okay, that's not brave. Later, she's got like severe social phobia, like works with 5 people, cannot tolerate being in the room if all 5 of them are in the same room. People she knows. She'd gone to a concert the week before with her cousin. I'm like, oh, like a little cafe? No, amphitheater, 50,000 people. It didn't occur to her to mention that as something she did that was brave, because they're never told to feel brave for what they've accomplished. I really want us to say, hey, you are amazing for doing things that terrify you. And I hope you feel proud. Because unfortunately, you're not going to get a lot of other people feeling proud for you or of you. I mean, ideally, we start doing it. We start feeling proud of them, and then they recognize that, oh, I can feel proud of myself now. But for a lot of kids, they need to just somehow come up with it on their own because they don't get it mirrored to them by the people around them. So some stats. What's a PowerPoint without stats, right? Okay. It's really hard to get real stats. I went to try and update these numbers and discovered, well, let's see, it might be 1 in 8, it might be 1 in 3, who knows? But basically, lots of anxiety out there. The second bullet point, I have no idea how they quantify a negative of who's not getting treatment. But one thing that's just obvious is if you have a mental issue and you don't get treatment, you don't do as well at everything else. You know, they don't do as well in school, they don't do as well socially. And once they're old enough to reach the top shelf, they might start self-medicating with alcohol or substance abuse, other substances or self-harm. So it is a problem. Do we all agree that it's a growing problem? Okay. Do we agree that if I was standing here 2 years ago and said, do we all agree it's a growing problem? We would raise our hands just as much. Okay. Yeah, this pandemic has not brought the numbers down. Go figure. But even before that, we've got all these different reasons for it. People say, so tell me, why are kids more anxious now? As if there's just one reason. You know, there's never just one reason for anything that's complicated. But I could pull out what some of them are. Okay, there have been family structure changes. You know, back in the day, parents didn't divorce no matter what, which was not necessarily a good thing. But there are lots of kids where they're really uncertain about where the world is. Academics and high stakes tests. You guys don't have to do MCAS, right? Or is that nodding that you do not? Excellent. I'm so jealous. Yeah, having this whole, because one thing is anxiety is contagious. And so you take a public school system and you give them a high stakes test and you tell all the teachers administering the test, oh, by the way, if your kids don't do well, a detail that you have only slight control over, you will end up punished for it. So the teachers are tied into knots. The administration's tied into knots. Everyone goes in terrified of this test. The kids come in and they can just feel it. So they're tied into knots. And so all this high stakes testing really makes everybody terrified. There's lots of more of that competition, comparison. You know, when I was in high school, it was like hardcore to apply to like 5 or 6 colleges. Now that's like the bare minimum to get in anywhere. Not so much during the lockdown and so on, but frequently parents have the kids scheduled for all these extracurricular activities. Every single moment must be scheduled. So the kids get to spend their entire lives in that wonderful realm of I'm probably late, I should get going, feeling that we all just really love so much we want to share with everyone around us, right? And people say, well, you have to have them scheduled because if they're left to their own devices, that's when problems happen. Like, well, yeah, because they've never had the chance to practice what to do when left to their own devices. You know, when I was a kid, if you went to a grown-up and said, I'm bored, what would the grown-up say? Remember that? I'd be like, well, I have some lovely chores for you to do then. You know, it was like, well, that's so totally not my problem, kid. Deal with it. Now, if a kid says to someone, I'm bored, the parents are like, I must fix this. You know, they become a practically cruise director. I could sign you up for this, or let's make a play date, or let's do this. So the kids never learn how to deal with it themselves. And they also learn that boredom, just even boredom, is a noxious thing that they must not have because they need an adult to come in and fix it. Cannot have any discomfort whatsoever. The increase of violence is very real in some areas. It's shared with all areas. Everyone is made to feel like it's real in their neighborhood. Thanks to the news, thanks to the well-intentioned effort to have kids be ready if something happened. You know, taking small children and having them physically rehearse an active shooter is not really very good for their mental health. I mean, yes, you want them to know that when this alarm happens, you go and you do this. But having it be, and this is, I mean, it's kind of like you wouldn't do fire drills where you're also wafting fake smoke through the building and screaming a lot and cranking up the thermostat and maybe showing them pictures of burnt bodies. You know, we just go, yeah, when that alarm goes off, you have to calmly and quietly do what we tell. But the active shooter drills, I mean, there's some schools where they like have actors come in with squibs, you know, it's bizarre. And so all the kids get tied in the knots about that being something that they expect. Social media, yeah. I've got a whole presentation on the impact of tech and social media on mental health. And then we all became absolutely dependent on it for a year and a half plus. It kind of feels like if you're in an abusive relationship, but then your abuser is now putting you through grad school and you're like, what do I do with this? Because it's still evil, it's still harmful, but it's also really necessary. And so figuring out how to deal with that is really hard. But social media is toxic in so many ways. I mean, quite aside from cyberbullying that everyone focuses on, just the fact that if you remember when you were younger, every day is like an emotional gauntlet. You get up in the morning, you try to make yourself look good enough. And then you go to school going through the whole day on the trust that you don't look that different from the last time you looked in the mirror. You don't have to be having a square pointed at you all day long if you're in remote school. And you try to be good enough all day for all of your friends. And then you get to go home and take a break from it. Now, no breaks, never break. It's 24/7 that you are in contact with your friends. If kids where the parents say, I'm going to take the phone away for a couple hours, the kids freak out because having your social media taken away from you for a couple hours has you coming back. Anyone ever get sick and be like out, with a broken leg or the flu for like a week and a half, and you come back and like everybody, all of your peers are on a totally different page than you were because you missed the couple hours offline does that to kids now. And so just the presence of it ties people into knots. And then last but totally not least, pervading all of this is the fact that we're Americans, we love being stressed out. Don't you? Don't you love your stress? Raise your hand if your stress is like you're I mean, it's what we talk about all the time. It must be the most important thing we have, right? It's how we keep score. It's how we tell who's the most important. The person who is the most at the end of their rope, the most overtaxed. Oh, they must be more important. Now, I had one presentation like this where a nurse came, it was after school, a nurse came in late. She's like, oh, I'm sorry, I had like 60 kids in my building. And all the other nurses are like, oh, how many students do you have? How many did you have today? And they all compare numbers for about 30 seconds before I got them back focused. Got to this slide and we're like, and we all know who's most important in the room now is her, because her number was highest. But that's the way we tend to view things. That the more stress you have, the more you matter. I mean, just think, if you come in on Monday and says, how was your weekend? If you were to try to say, oh, it was really mellow. Slept late. Hung out with my kids. We played some games. We made cookies. Yeah, that person's not going to play with you at recess now. It's going to be like, well, nice to be you. Some of us have responsibilities. If, on the other hand, you come in on Monday and you're like, oh my God, it was awful. I had to do this, and then this broke, and then this, and then running to this and this. And immediately someone else is like, oh yeah, and then I had this and this and this. And another person's, oh yeah, me, and pretty soon everyone is bonding over this vigorous, exciting game of misery poker. Knowing that whoever had the most stress over the weekend wins. We gotta stop doing that. Because the kids are watching, the kids get that same message. The kids know if they come home and the parents are like, so how's school? If they say, yeah, I'm doing good. I'm ready for the test tomorrow and I'm caught up on everything. The parents will say, oh, good, because I really need someone else to do the dishwasher. Whereas if they come in and say, oh my gosh, I'm behind in this and this and this, and I've got all these tests, and I don't know what I'm going to do, then they get validated that they're more important. So we really got to somehow find a way to brag more about our self-care and less, and notice when you do it really subtly. Back in the days when people would go to movies, if you come in and you say, hey, I just saw that new movie, how likely is the answer you get from people going, oh, I wish I had time to go to the movies. Great little way to point out that you're, as opposed to saying, oh, that's great. I hope I get to see it soon too, because I want to see that movie. Just subtle little shifts like that can totally shift the way we do that. So who would like to never feel anxious again? Anyone voting? Oh, you're going to have to hire so many more people because these folks are all going to get squished by buses. You need anxiety. You cannot live without anxiety. Anxiety is what gets you ready to deal with things. Anxiety is that little rush that tells you walk a little faster, that car is still coming. Anxiety is good for you. And it doesn't even always hurt. Mild anxiety. This is where your senses are wider. You're revved up, you're ready, you're about to get up and do a speech, you know, anything like that. It kind of feels energizing and good. Once you move into moderate, you're not having fun anymore. Okay, now you're feeling more, now your tech is not working and you're feeling more stressed. You know, you might start having, you know, unpleasant physical symptoms and so on. When you go into severe, yeah, you are scared, you are stressed, you are tunnel vision. You know, in moderate, you're focused on the problem, but if someone comes up and asks you about something else, you can shift. This, no, you're focused on this, someone comes up to talk to you about, you might not even hear them, you certainly can't shift gears. And panic, technically, is so far gone that you don't even know that you're anxious. You cannot possibly name what it is that is causing this. And you are so full of physical symptoms, you're sure that it's physical. These are the people who come to the ER having a heart attack. And when the EKG comes back normal, the ER is like, oh, you're fine. It's just anxiety. Go home. There's nothing wrong with you. Meanwhile, this person's like, I'm dying. And they don't seem to care. Now, of course, you've had any number of people come in and tell you about the panic attack they had in reaction to that and exactly. Technically, what they're referring to is an anxiety attack of severe anxiety, but it's not time to quibble with them about their terminology. So I just let that one slide. But I like this little diagram here because it shows if you got too little anxiety, nothing happening. If you got too much, yeah, that's burnout, nothing happening. You need in that middle, the yellow section is enough anxiety to be doing stuff. The yellow is you're getting tired. You're doing stuff, but you're doing a really lousy job of it. So I keep talking about the physical symptoms and recognizing that people will tend to say, if it's a physical thing caused by anxiety, oh, it's just anxiety. There's nothing wrong with you. Go home. You know, how many times have you heard kind of, oh, he has a stomach ache every day at 10, so I know it's not a real stomach ache. Like, no, it's a real stomach ache. He has a stomach, it aches. Those are the only prerequisites for a stomach ache. That's the definition, okay? And whenever I have a teacher who say that, I just hope that that teacher would come to me at some point for Tylenol for their stress headaches, that I can tell them their head doesn't really hurt right now, it's just anxiety. Because of course your head hurts when you got a stress headache. The fact that anxiety is causing it does not in any way make it less real. Same thing with all the physical symptoms. In fact, especially the younger kids are, physical symptoms is how your body tells you you're having emotions. You know, turns out the head and the body are connected. Who'd have thunk it? They talk to each other all the time. You know, a very young kid might not have the words to say, I'm very, very anxious about the state of my parents' marriage, when they're all they can say is, I get tummy rumblies whenever mommy and daddy are yelling at each other. You know, so we want to pay attention to the physical symptoms and not discount them as, oh, there's nothing to be done. We want to instead say, okay, you've got an uncomfortable thing here. We need to be detectives. We want to find out what's causing this so that we can address what's causing it, not so we can brush it aside and say, oh, just go back to class, there's nothing. You know, so, oh, you've got stomach ache every day at 10. Your stomach's trying to tell you something. Let's figure out what it's trying to tell you. Might be telling you that you never have breakfast. Might be telling you that you always have breakfast and maybe you shouldn't have dairy products anymore. Might be telling you that you really hate math. Might be telling you that the kids in your math class don't like you and you don't know what to do about that. Might be telling you that by 10 a.m., you've started remembering mommy and daddy's fight and you worry about what's happening at home in your absence. Could be any number of things. So we want to figure out what it is so that we can actually address it. So there's lots of really good tools to help kids do it. One school said they laid a kid down and traced them so that they had a life-size blank body, and just let everyone write in it where they feel different things. So kids can come and go, oh yeah, other kids get headaches when they're stressed. Other kids get their shoulders really tight when they're angry. I'm not a freak. This is just what nature does. So how this natural anxiety thing that keeps you alive when you're being chased by a bear develops into a disorder is that the brain is very, very plastic. Whatever it does a lot, it gets really good at doing. It can default to that very quickly. So if getting scared is what it does very, very, very a lot, it does it almost automatically. You know, it used to be when something is threatening me, I feel anxious. Now, if something surprises me, I feel anxious because my brain is thinking, well, more likely than not, we're supposed to be getting scared soon, so let's go ahead and get started now. So it becomes a very well-worn path towards being anxious. Some brains are more inclined to do that, some brains less. That's where you get the nature versus nurture. Surprise, it's both. You know, you've got the predisposition in the brain and then the environment that maximizes that. As a result, the kind of things you see are the brain having this threat response, this, oh my God, I am threatened response to things that it doesn't really apply to. You know, it might be to a harmless trigger. You know, who else is afraid of spiders? I love it when there's this big a group because I'm never alone. I hate spiders. Here in New England, it's a totally useless phobia to have because, I mean, in Australia, the suckers can kill you, definitely. But up here, not so much. And definitely a photo of a spider is not going to hurt me. And yet I cannot convince my autonomic nervous system not to have my throat and my heart jump into my throat if I'm suddenly startled by a picture. Okay, so you have a reaction to a harmless trigger, or you might have a reaction to a trigger that's associated to a past threat. Because when you are threatened, your brain is not doing logic, your brain is doing react to save you. So you might have someone where they were in a car accident and it was awful. And now they're recovered and they're driving along, they drive across a bridge and suddenly their heart is pounding and they feel like they're about to die. They might not even remember that half a mile before their car accident, they drove across a bridge. Their brain is going, ooh, bridge, get ready, car accident coming. Don't get hurt this time, because your brain is trying to protect you from the bad thing happening again. It's not doing it logically. And you may or may not even know what it's associated with. That's where you get a person where, oh, I can't be around anyone of the same race or the same gender or the same body build or wearing the same color clothes as someone who hurt me, or I can't go in that building because something bad happened there, things like that. You can have anxiety that's out of proportion to the trigger. My daughter, she's got OCD, and she frequently gets into arguments about whether this is a symptom or just logic. And she'll be like, well, no one would want to pick that up, Mama. It's gross. I'm like, yes, no one would want to clean up after the cat puke. Thank you very much. We all agree. It's gross. But a person without an anxiety disorder would, you know, get some paper towel, clean it up, and then probably, hopefully try to not touch anything until they have a chance to go wash their hands. Where she would have to put on gloves, bring like a roll of paper towels and some Lysol spray and be shaking and crying the whole time until she can go and wash her hands really for a long time in very hot water. So having an out of proportion reaction to a trigger. And then there's the kids where their anxiety wiring is just like, well, we're going to be scared anytime now, so we might as well just start. So they are constantly anxious, even when there is nothing there, because their brain is just wanting to be ready to go. If you spend too much of your time in moderate or severe anxiety, it causes organ damage, basically. You know, the brain gets very practiced in going there automatically, but also it suppresses your immune system, it causes headaches, stomach aches, all of that. So that's why we call it an anxiety disorder. Now, exactly the definition of diagnosing an anxiety disorder, because we have to be careful if we mention anything around diagnosing a mental health issue, people take offense. People take that as that's an insult to them. Now, if you've got a kid who's coughing and wheezing a lot and you say, hey, if you ask the doctor about asthma, they do not react the way they do if you say, you know, have you had anyone check to see whether your kid might have an anxiety disorder? You're like, what do you mean? How dare you say that? So we do want to make it very clear, because there's all kinds of web pages out there saying, you know, isn't it ridiculous? Psych is just wrong. You know, do you believe this DSM-5, which is the book of diagnoses, they've got phobia down as a mental illness. Do you think a person who's afraid to fly is mentally ill? How stupid is that? Sometimes I hate my computer. But the thing is, intrinsic to the definition is that it causes clinically significant distress or dysfunction. If I am afraid to fly, and I can perfectly calmly keep my feet on the ground, no distress, no dysfunction, no diagnosis. If, on the other hand, I'm afraid to fly, and I've got to go to a business meeting in another city, and if I don't get myself on that plane, I'm going to lose my job. I've got some problems now. I would probably like some help with them. I might need to see someone to teach me some coping strategies or to prescribe me some coping strategies so that I can get on the plane and save my job. And these people, while lovely, despite what the web pages say, don't generally want to work for free. And for them to be able to bill insurance, they have to put down a diagnosis, at which point Thank goodness it is in the DSM-5 as a mental illness, because then they can get reimbursed, you can get your coping strategies, and you can keep your job. So distress and dysfunction are the definitions for diagnosis. But we want to also look at what are the things that we might worry about, even if they aren't up to diagnosable levels. So the things to notice in a kid and say, yeah, this is looking concerning, would be things like the kid who's just always worried. You know, we all know those kids, the worry wart kids, where their brain automatically in any situation goes to, how is this going to go bad? How is this going to hurt me? How is this going to be a catastrophic, horrible thing, no matter what I try? The ones who are worrying about adult issues, you know, the kids who are, and at one point I had one presentation where someone said, well, what if that's kind of the parents' fault? You know, what if it's the kids worried about the rent because the parents keep worrying about the rent in front of the kids? I say, okay, we're not diagnosing them. We're just saying we want to intervene. We want to do something. What you might do is call the parents and tell them to stop doing that because they're really scaring their kids. But you notice the kids who default to adult issues. My daughter, probably the first sign that she might have an anxiety disorder, we totally missed because it was so cute. When she was 18 months old and she's in the car seat and falls asleep, as they do, and I'm driving along, my first indication that she had just woken up always was this little voice piping out of the back seat saying, are you sure this is the right way? Because it doesn't look very familiar. It's adorable. When your toddler is backseat driving, though, it's a little bit age inappropriate and probably not the best sign. So then there's the kids who cannot accept reassurance. The reassurance has to be real reassurance, not just, oh, don't worry about it. This dog never, you know, there's no not that there's no reason to be freaked out, but to say, yes, if that happens, this is how it will be taken care of. So now you can feel safe. If it is, no matter what safety things are put in place there. You know, the kid, I'm scared of that dog. Okay, let's go in the next room. And they are still scared of the dog, even though they aren't even around the dog. That sort of thing. They cannot accept reassurance. And connected to this are the kids who get stuck. You all know what that means, right? I don't have to really unpack that. In jargon, we call it perseveration, you know, where once the worried thought gets in their head, it just keeps going. You know, I'm really worried my mom's not going to pick me up on time at 9. It's like, okay, well, if that happens, we will be calling her at 1:30 to make sure. 9:15, but what if my mom doesn't come to pick me up? Or they just cannot let go of it. And of course, the physical symptoms. So the reason why we want to recognize it before it's diagnosable and do something is because guaranteed whoever's got the anxiety is already doing things. They are using coping strategies. Unfortunately, the automatic go-to coping strategies are usually not the best ones. They're what we call maladaptive, meaning that they make you feel better right now, but they make the problem much, much bigger as you go forward. Things like ignoring the issues, you know, oh, I'm so worried about my test on Friday, but you know, when I'm playing video games, I don't worry about it all. So I'm just going to ignore the test on Friday and play video games all week. Not the best answer, you know. It's connected to avoiding triggers. I'm just kind of like, I'm not going to go anywhere near that thing that scares me, you know. And the more you do that, the more the anxiety grows. But kids do that all the time. It's a natural reaction. This hurts. So naturally, you move away from the thing that hurts. If you burn your hand, you pull it away. That is just the natural reaction. But this is a world where if you do that, the stove then gets bigger and follows you into the next room. So you need to learn not to do that. But not only do they do that, but they'll also get everyone else around them doing it and make it everyone else's job. You know, my spider phobia got to live way longer than it would otherwise because I never encountered spiders. People would do anything to keep a spider from being in a room where I was, just that they wouldn't have to deal with it. And thus I never had to deal with it. So they might try to get a sense of control out of rituals or compulsions. You know, the kid's like, I don't know, I can't do anything about my parents fighting, but I can make my toys be lined up just so. You know, gives them a sense of control over what they can, but it can keep spiraling more and more and more into compulsions and even OCD. And then there's substance abuse or self-harm. People are not stupid. They do what works. Substance abuse makes you feel better. And then the next day, it's much, much worse. But in the moment, you're not thinking about the next day. You know, and this is the problem that kids are not too good at thinking about the longer term future. Now, as adults, we can say, if I go home at the end of a really stressful day, I could say, okay, I could go walk the dog for half an hour and then I'll feel slightly better. Or I could say, the heck with the dog, I'm going to the liquor cabinet and feel much better in 15 minutes. But as adults, we know that there be dragons. That's not a good answer. Kids, not so much. Once they find an off switch, they're like, why should I practice any of these things that just make it a little bit better if there's something that makes it go away completely? You know, and self-injury and substance abuse do that. So a person might have various coping strategies and they're like, oh, wow, it's like a minefield. How do I tell if what I've got is a good one or a bad one? Well, start with one. You've only got one. Never a good idea to just have one. You need as many coping strategies as you can in case you don't have access to or this one stops working. You can't have a stool with just one leg. So if you've only got one, you know, the person is like, I call my sister and I feel much better. It's like, okay, that's great. But you got to have some other ones in case she doesn't answer. So there's nothing wrong with talking to your sister other than the fact that you don't have a plan B. Sometimes there might be something wrong with what you turn to do. And the way you tell is, okay, what if you had to do a lot more of it? You know, if you had to do a lot more of it to get the relief you get, then you need to try to not do it too much. Might not be that you do it never, you know, the occasional glass of wine on a stressful day, not so bad. But if it's the only thing you do every single day when you're stressed, you're gonna start needing something stronger than wine. So you wanna make sure you branch out so that if you had to do a lot more of it, it would be a problem. You know, if going for a job makes you feel better, great. What if I had to do a lot more of it? Well, you could become a marathon runner, but you need to make sure there's something you can do on rainy days. So I really like this poster from them. I know you can't read it in the back. It says, anxiety is a thin stream of fear trickling through the mind. If encouraged, it cuts a channel into which all other thoughts are drained. Because that's the problem with avoidance. And sometimes avoidance might not even be avoidance, but just really giving in to the anxiety reaction of how terrible this is. And like, have you ever moved a desk and there's gum on the underside? It's gross. I wish they wouldn't do that. But if you have anxiety about the germs and stuff, and when you do that, you immediately freak out and have to go wash your hands really hard and really give into the, yes, this was just as bad as my anxiety tells me it is. You come back and you look at that desk and you cannot help but notice that the kid who stuck the gum on the problem probably touched the top of the desk too. And the light switch and the keyboard and the pen. And pretty soon you can't touch anything in the room. So that's why you want to, even if what the person has is a fairly benign, it's not that hard to avoid this. You really want to watch out for giving into it. What's happening here is a learned fear response. Okay. The kid has a feeling, or the adult, if I do the scary thing, something terrible will happen. If I get up to give a speech in front of the class, they're all going to laugh at me. What do you say when a kid says that? Call it out.
Don't be silly. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, no one's going to laugh at you. Don't worry about it. Yeah, that is our go-to answer. And as you no doubt guess, it's not the right one. But we'll get back to what is a good one. Because what happens is, if they avoid doing it, it reinforces the message because of a malfunction in how we do logic. I'm going to come back to this slide, but for a moment, we'll step ahead to this one. Anyone do logic where if this, then that? So if it's a horse, then it's an animal. If you switch them and say, well, if it's an animal, that's a horse, you'd be like, oh, no, there's lots of non-horse animals. If you negate them both and say, well, if it's not a horse, that's not an animal. Again, there's a lot of non-horse animals out there. The only one is that if it's not an animal, then it's not a horse. Okay? That's how logic works. But what your gut is doing is you're saying, okay, if I do this, something terrible will happen. I did not do it. Therefore, it was true that something terrible would have happened if I did. Which is not the way logic works in your brain if you work at it, but it's totally the way the logic works in your stomach if you don't. So you go back here, and if the person manages to avoid doing the thing, and then they don't have the terrible thing happen, their brain and their body absorb that as proof that if they had done it, the terrible thing absolutely would have happened. And if someone else helps them avoid it, even stronger, because after all, the teacher let me do a paper instead of a speech. So clearly the teacher thought everyone was going to laugh too. Why else would they do that? So absolute proof. So there's also the fact that when they say everyone's going to laugh, I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg. you know? It's also all the feelings that go with that. And all the feelings that go with avoidance are even stronger. So you got a kid who's like, oh, don't make me go to school. I can't go to school. No, you got to go to school. No, please, just one more day, just one more day. And the one's like, fine, okay, one more day and you're going tomorrow. And the kid gets waves of relief. Way better than anything in the liquor cabinet. Good luck getting them to go to school the next day. Because it's very reinforcing that way. So what we need to do is learn a new response. We used to refer to this as unlearning, except it's not unlearned because these problems can snap back into place. You think you got them all buried, and then they're like the zombie anxiety that pops up at random 6 months later when something happens to trigger it. But what you're trying to do is cover it up with lots of counterexamples to draw on and tell your brain that it's lying to you. So you do this by doing the scary thing, or as close to the scary thing as you possibly can. You do it, the bad thing doesn't happen, and if the universe were a fair, just place, you'd be cured. You'd be like, see, all set. Except that's not the way it works. Because first of all, like I said, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I said everyone would laugh at me. I also meant my throat will be dry, my legs will be shaking, my brain will sometimes go blank, and I'll not know the next word, and I'll say the wrong word, and my voice will be shaking, and then everyone will laugh at me. Maybe no one laughed, but all those other things happened. What do I do with that? There's also the fact that, remember, this is a system that your brain has evolved to keep you from being eaten by predators. So it is very, very invested in getting you to run away from the bear. So even though I didn't get laughed at this time, your brain is right there so unhelpfully saying, yeah, but next time you totally are. Yeah, but they were all thinking about laughing at you. Or yeah, but Bobby was absent. If Bobby had been there, he would have started laughing, everyone would have joined in, they would have laughed at you. Or yeah, but the teacher kept looking at them. If the teacher looked away, they totally would have laughed at you. And so your brain is right there undermining what you're trying to learn about it being okay to do this. So you got to do it again and again and again. Do not tell kids that if they keep doing it, it will get easy. Got to stop lying to the poor kids. But it will get less hard because all of those physical symptoms are your body's threat response. And after enough times of no bear attacking you during your speech, the body's like, yeah, let's only turn it up a little bit today. I'm sick of cranking it up to 11 every single time. And so the physical symptoms will get less. And you'll get more and more counterexamples. So when your brain comes along and says, oh yeah, but next time for sure, you can answer to that voice. You can say, okay, that's totally plausible what you're telling me. But all those other things that you said were totally plausible didn't happen. So maybe this one won't either. So it's a gradual buildup to a point of being less extraordinarily uncomfortable. So your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors, like I said, the brain, the body, everything interacts and influences each other. And this can be a cycle that just spins and spins and spins and gets the anxiety stronger and stronger and stronger. You've got the feelings, the anxiety, the fear, the stomach fluttering, the headache, the nausea, the puking, whatever you've got going. Okay, you've got the thoughts, your brain going, if you do that, terrible things will happen. Or you can't do that. Or you're weak, you're stupid, you can't. This is terrible. And then you've got the behavior, run away, get someone else to do it, take care of it. And then the more I run away, the more that proves to me that I can't do it. After all, the teacher's helping me run away, so the teacher thinks I can't do it too, which makes it even scarier to think about doing it, which makes me run away more. And they circle and circle and circle and get stronger and stronger. So what we need to do is use that same system in the other direction to make it weaker. So on all three sides of it, for the physical, emotional symptoms, you want to be doing self-soothing things. Because that whole thing where the brain can make the body react, it's a two-way street. Your body can make your brain change. You know, we used to think that if we're sitting here and a bear walks in, we'd all get scared and then our heart rates would go up. Turns out actually when the bear walks in the room, the first thing is your heart rate goes up. And then your brain is like, oh, heart rate went up, maybe I should be scared. You know, they actually did a study to prove this. It did not involve bringing a bear into the room, which is kind of a shame because that would have been cool. But what they did was they had people sitting looking on a computer at scary pictures and ranking how scary the pictures were. Half the people, they gave them medicine that stabilizes their blood pressure. So their heart rate can't change so fast. Their blood pressure can't shoot up so fast. And the people taking that medicine reported the pictures were not as scary as the people who didn't have that medicine. that with their heart rate, there's one that we give people at night to prevent nightmares, because if your blood pressure is more stable while you sleep, your brain can't make scary pictures as easily. So physical symptoms, we work on self-soothing things to help quell the physical symptoms. Thoughts, we change the way people are thinking about things. I'll come back to that with baskets. And then behavior is, don't run away. Move towards it if you can. At the very least, run away slower, walk away, wait a little bit before you run away. Incremental change is very important to be recognizing and praising. You know, if we want the kid to appreciate the fact that they are only slightly, but still slightly less anxious than they were yesterday, we need to appreciate the fact that they are leaving class slightly, only just slightly, but slightly later than they did yesterday. You know, it goes both ways. Part of the problem is that we all succumb to this idea of easy things and hard things. You know, we all live in a world where we think there's two baskets. This basket is for easy. It's easy. You know it's easy because I did it. I do things that are easy. The things that I do are easy. Easy, do, can. Those are synonyms. Those are the same word. You know, I can do it. I do it because it's easy. And we would do this to ourselves all the time. Think of all the things you've worked so hard to master. And once you can do it, you're like, oh yeah, it's easy. You know, you make this glorious cake and people are like, wow, that's so amazing. Oh, and yeah, it's no big deal. Like, yeah, how many 100 cakes did you make before you got to the one that's beautiful like that? But we very quickly undermine our own success that way. We also have the basket for hard things. You know, it's hard because I'm not doing it, because it's hard, because I can't, hard, don't. Also synonyms. So when a kid says, I can't do this, and you say, oh, come on, I know you can. What the kid hears is we are saying it's easy. Like we picked it up and put it in the wrong basket. And you're like, no, I just told you I can't. What we all need to do, modeling for the kids and also recognizing for the kids, is grow a third basket. And that's the basket for, this is really hard. And I'm going to do it anyway. Part of it is expanding the concept of can to be a longer term word. I'm not saying you can do it today. When I say you can do this, I'm saying that it is within the realm of your abilities that you will be able to be doing this at some point in the future. Can't is a very permanent word. It's very hard for me to do it. Not so permanent. That's something you can work with. We want to recognize that every time a kid says, I can't do this, you just want to automatically say, it's very hard for you to do this. And let's figure out what we can do about that. Because think about it, if you ever had something you're like, yeah, I can't, and then you work really hard, you try really hard, and you do it, the reaction you get from everyone, and probably yourself, is, see, that wasn't that bad. If on the other hand, you're like, oh, this is really hard, oh, this is really hard, and then you try really hard, and then you do it, the reaction from everyone around you and yourself is, wow, good job, congratulations, you did something hard. So we really want to switch the words and how we think about it. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is using that triangle to try and make things better. Now, this is what people would hopefully be doing in therapy. They might not have therapy. Even if they have therapy, it's 45 minutes once a week. So this needs to be reinforced everywhere they go. And so we want to break down what are the steps about it, okay? They need to learn how to do those coping strategies, challenge the thoughts, and do like deep breathing and other physical strategies to soothe. They need to figure out what it is they're afraid of and scale it from small, medium, large, you know, get different size of how anxious they are. That can be a hard one for them. Lots of times anxiety just feels like an all or nothing. You know, if you've got a 10-point anxiety scale like that one, you'll be like, what's the point of 3? 3 is just a 10 on the way. But retrospectively, you might be able to. I have one girl with an anxiety disorder. I'm like, okay, so you're not going to classes, but she's scared of classes. I'm like, so English, how anxious are you in English? Well, I'm anxious. I'm like, okay, so we'll call that a 5. What about science? Oh, science is worse. It's a 9. Like, okay, and what about math? Math's a 15. She thinks she won because she put 15 on my 10-point scale, but I'm fine because now I know the hierarchy. And I blow her mind by turning to her and saying, okay, this week, don't go to math. Don't even try. Go to English every day. Go to science for 10 minutes. This really blows their minds because what they're always told is there is nothing satisfactory short of 100% go to every single thing and look like you enjoy it. You know, no credit for you for all this work until you completely fix everything. And they're very reluctant to take credit. She comes back the next week. I'm like, so how'd you do? Oh, terrible. Well, did you go to science? Yeah. How long did you stay? 10 minutes. That was the goal. Yeah, but I still had to leave. You know, she achieved her goal and she can't take credit for it. So we really want to make sure that we break it into a hierarchy that they can do, because what you're going to do is gradually expose the triggers. You start with the small ones, you build up to the bigger ones gradually. Now, to be able to do that, like I said, they have to be able to think of that scale. They have to be able to think of anxiety coming in small, medium, and large. You want to find whatever metaphor works for them. The anxiety thing there I got, it's a bigger version. It is the cutest anxiety scale you will ever see. I'm so proud of that one. You don't normally have an anxiety scale that makes you go, oh, it's so adorable. So they also need to be able to tolerate low levels of anxiety. You know, if their goal is when I'm anxious, I have to leave the class and I'll go back when I'm not anxious. How are you ever going to take a test? You cannot have zero anxiety be your goal. You know, and when we help kids with their plans, we need to not have it be the goal we tell them. You know, that same girl, her plan was that when she felt anxious, she could go to the bathroom and come back when she felt better. When she feels better? I mean, she's got an anxiety disorder. What do you mean? When she's 20? What did they expect? They got really upset when she'd like go to the bathroom and be there for like half an hour. Like, well, you're the one who told her not to come back until she felt better. So you want to have the ability to say, okay, yeah, my anxiety is like a 2 or a 3. I don't need to leave class for a 2 or 3. I can do things to try and make it go down a notch, or at least keep it from going up. And we want them to know, what is it that they're afraid of? Spell out your worst case scenario. That's where when we get back to the kid who said, oh, I can't do a speech in front of the class, they'll all laugh at me. And we want to say, of course, they're not going to laugh. Or have you ever seen everyone laugh at it? You know, this is so not going to happen. Instead, seems very counterintuitive. You turn around and say, really? And then what happens? And then what happens after that? And what happens after that? Sometimes they'll spin out into totally ridiculous things to where they're going, yeah, I know that's not going to happen. Great. Now their brain is starting to reality check what they're thinking. Or it might be that they're like, oh yeah. And if this bad thing, you know, if my throat got really dry, I get a drink of water. Well, why don't you just bring a bottle of water with you in the first place? That'll make that faster. So it might give them ideas of what they can do to prepare to make it not so scary. Or they might recognize that, yeah, what the building catches on fire? Well, what happens if the building catches on fire? Well, the alarm goes off, and then what happens? We all go outside. Okay. And so what you're doing is, instead of them mentally rehearsing the terrible thing, you're helping them mentally rehearse a positive response to the terrible thing that gives them a sense of control of the situation. What you're helping them do is recognize after the fact, did the bad thing happen? No. Or after the fact, did the bad thing happen? Yes, my legs were shaking. You know what? You were strong and brave and you got through it anyway. Congratulations. It's really hard to give a speech if your legs are shaking. Good on you. Because built into that, oh my God, my legs might be shaking, is the message, and I can't handle it. So the thing that didn't happen was their inability to handle it. So the physical things that we can recommend to them for self-soothing, look to the physical symptoms. Whatever symptoms they have, you try to reverse them. We do this all the time. Like if you are hot and flushed and on the verge of tears over something, you automatically go and you get a cold face cloth and wipe your face, right? We all do that. You feel less hot, you feel less flushed. You feel less on the verge of tears. It is not like the magic cloth that erases all grief, but it does bring it down a few notches to where you can get a grip on it. So if when you're anxious, you get really hot, get a nice pack. If you get really cold, do something that warms you up. Muscles usually tense up when you're anxious, so do stretching. You know, get up and walk around and come back. Make it a full round trip. Don't say go and come back when you feel better. Like go to the, hey, could you take this down to the office and then come back? Just getting up and walking and coming back can discharge the anxiety and help the person feel better, especially because remember, this is wired to try and get you to run away from the bear. Sometimes just walking to the office and back tricks your brain into thinking, well, I guess there's no bear because we moved. We got away from it. Yeah. Distraction can be good. You know, not avoidance, because how anxious are you? Now do this for a specific amount of time, and now how anxious are you? And notice if it went down. So if watching a video on YouTube helps, make sure you don't have YouTube on. Just keep playing the next one, the next one, the next one. Have it be a very specific one. Now, how often do you suggest these? And the kids like, it doesn't work. All the time, right? I love it when kids like, I've tried all the coping skills and none of them work. A coping skill is literally any human action you could take. There's an infinite number of those, so you cannot have tried all of them. It might be brushing your hair. It might be going for a walk. It might be talking to this person. It might be telling a joke. It might be listening to a joke. It could be anything. Different things work in different situations. You need to develop a sense of what do I need right now? You know, it's like when you're hungry and you don't know what you feel like and you go and you're looking in the fridge, like, no, that's too sweet. No, yes, that's exactly what will satisfy this feeling I have right now. You want to have them develop that sense around coping strategies. You know, what do I want now? Do I want to be moving or do I want to be tight? Do I want to, and get a sense of what do I need right now and where can I get it? You know, so when they're like, it doesn't work. Well, we also want to ask, how long were you doing it for? You know, they expect work to mean it is an off switch. I know it works because I did it for a whole 30 seconds and now I feel fine. Like, no, first of all, no off switch. Ain't nothing healthy out there that's an off switch. You want a volume knob. So now take it down a few notches and you might need to do it for a bit longer, or you might need to do other things. There is also the possibility that it doesn't work. Not everything works for everyone. If any of you have teenagers or young adults living at home who keep complaining that there's nothing they like in the fridge, isn't it great when you reach the age where you can say, well, then you go shopping, why don't you? You know, if you don't like what I have put in your sample toolbox of suggestions, start putting other things in there yourself. Try it out. You know, you don't know until you try. You need to trial and error lots of different things. Okay, and try them when you're not freaking out, because nothing new is going to work when you're in the middle of freaking out. So maybe when you're mildly anxious or when you feel fine, try doing these things so that they're more likely to work when you really need them to. Here's a bunch of different examples of things. I actually like the idea of putting them on cards. You know, like 50 Ways to Take a Break is a brilliant poster, but what happens if you think about 50 for swing? You know, pretty soon you're crossing things out, squeezing things in, it becomes a train wreck. Or when the person looks at their list and they're like, yeah, that won't work, no, maybe, no, yes, no, maybe, yes, maybe, no, yes. See, nothing works because all the no's overwhelm you. But if you've got them on cards, one stops working, you throw it away. Got a new one, slip it in, no problem. And you can then sort them. These are the ones I can do in school. These are the ones I can do at home. These are the ones I can do in this class. These are the ones I can do in that class. It also quantifies it. So if you have an urge to do something you shouldn't, like leave class, you can say, okay, do 3 cards first, and then go to the nurse if you still need to. And then when you get to the nurse, it's like, oh, tell me what cards you tried. Did they help a little? Okay, well, maybe you need to do more of them. Oh, they didn't? Well, again, get rid of that card. Let's get some new cards in there. It's a great way to quantify it. And again, this is not just for kids with anxiety. This is not just for kids. You know, everyone could use this. You know, I had Deck at home and I'm like, okay, I come home and I really want to yell at my husband about something. Maybe he deserves it. Maybe it's just my mood. Not sure. Can't tell right now because I'm too pissed off. So I will do 3 cards first. I go, I brush my hair, I fold towels. Yes, I had a card for folding towels. Making a chaotic pile, turn into nice even squares is very satisfying for me, okay? And pet the cat or drink some ice water or something. And then after I've done the 3 cards, now I can stop and say, so do I still want to yell at my husband? Maybe I do, but now I can yell at him more mindfully than I would have before. Or maybe I'm in a different space and don't need to. So very, very helpful. So the way to implement all the strategies, you want them to identify their triggers and rank them. They might need help breaking them into pieces. You know, like if someone's like, I'm afraid of spiders, like, well, it's spiders. Okay, if I were to hand you a spider or a photo of a spider, which would you prefer? Okay, yeah, so a photo of a spider is not as bad as a video of a spider, is not as bad as a spider in a tank over there, is not as bad as a spider in a tank over there with the lid off, is not as bad as me standing right next to the tank, is not as bad as me noticing the tank is empty and I don't know where the damn spider went. So now we've got it all lined up and I've got my coping strategies ready to go. And I've got someone there supportively helping me. I then approach the easier ones and work my way up. Okay, the person, if you're the support person, your job is to remind them of the coping strategy and be proud of them. Tell them what a great job they're doing. I say, wow, that's really good. Oh, I'm scared of the gym teacher. He might yell at me. Okay, well, I'm right here. You got your squeeze ball. And we're going to stand over here and look at him way over there. Okay, and tomorrow we're going to go up closer. The next day, he's going to talk to me, but not to you, but kind of next to you. The next day, and gradually building up to it. Your goal, ultimately, is to be able to tolerate the level of anxiety that even trying this causes. They need to be able to tolerate mild distress, or they won't even start on this path, okay? And you want them to be able to react in a more controlled way. You want to say, okay, yes, you want it to be your choice, not the anxiety's choice, how you react. Like, yeah, if a spider startles me, I am still startled. But I get to decide whether I'm going to scream and run away. This is very useful now that I drive a car, because it turns out the suckers can get inside cars. And if my only response is doing what the anxiety says, which is scream and run away, not so good when one comes dangling down and on the highway. So I want to be able to make the choice of whether I'm going to react to it. We want to praise them for incremental growth, you know? It's like, okay, you managed to stay in that class for 10 minutes when yesterday you came out after 5. Good job. You're doing good. You're getting better. You're getting there. And we want them to be able to manage unexpected exposure. You know, they round the corner and there's a gym teacher. And hopefully they will now, you know, they don't have you, they don't have their squeezy ball. Maybe they'll take a few deep breaths and back around the corner before they turn and run. You know, whatever. You want them to be able to manage unexpected exposure and also manage relapse. It's going to happen. They work and work and work. And now they feel like they've got control of this. And then their house of cards falls down. Like, yeah, but today the English teacher yelled at someone, and now I'm scared of all teachers. I'm worse than I ever was before. Like, okay, you are not back to square one. You're never back to square one. Because the thing about being truly at square one is that square two is impossible when you're standing on square one. Once you've managed to get past that, you now know that it's possible. You know that it's really hard. So don't say, oh, but you've done this before, so you can do it easy. No, it's going to hurt. It's going to be hard. It's not going to hurt as much. It's not going to be as hard. It's not going to take as long because you know how to get there now. Where are we on time? The case example is always
119.
okay. We can. This isn't, people always, I like to get to the end and then have people tell me cases of kids you've actually talked to, because that's like real. You don't want, I mean, look what I did. You don't want me writing a case example because I never know who's in the audience. So I don't want to make any one role be the bad guy. And so they all screw up. I mean, check this out. You got a 5th grader who's going to the nurse after lunch and wants to lie down. So you've got a nurse who doesn't even talk to her assessor at all, just says, go ahead, lie down, and lets her just miss the whole afternoon. You got a teacher who's just complaining. She's just trying to get out of math. How long does it take to just pop a pill in her and send her back to me? You got a mom who will not shut up about how it's everyone else's fault. And those kids are bullying her, and it's terrible, terrible. And when she texts me from class, I'm just going to pick her up without even calling ahead. And the administration who doesn't want to talk about it at all and just says, well, when she comes, we have no choice. So because I didn't want anyone to be taking the flack, so I gave them all the flack I could find. That's why you never want me to write case examples. And when we get into serious mental illnesses, I used to work at state hospitals. I can give you some serious ones there. So who would you talk to first? Let's just do that. Of all these people. And rest assured, there is no right answer because it might be whoever you're next to first. So what would you say?
I would talk to Molly first.
To Molly. And what sort of things do you think you might say to her?
She goes after lunch. Did you eat your lunch?
Asking about what happened at lunch. Did she eat lunch? Yeah. And so on.
Happened at lunch?
Yeah, it is curious about the pattern in it. That's what you can get in the detective thing. You know, is it that at lunch is when all those mean girls are collected and staring at her? Or is it at lunch she doesn't have something else to focus on and be doing? You know, or is it at lunch the teacher after lunch is the one who's guaranteed to just let her go? Could be any number of things. What sort of things might we say to the teacher? Yeah, I know that one's always hard. So what do we want to say to mom? Actually, what do we want to say to mom about texting? Do you guys have kids who have cell phones? And do they like text? Hey, I can't stand it anymore. You gotta come get me. And the parents come without even calling ahead. Yes, that is really a problem. One thing is, let's talk about the parents. Okay, let's move on to that. Because people are like, this would be so much easier if we didn't have parents doing this. Like, yeah, but then you'd have to raise the kids too. So first thing you gotta do is recognize, bar none, there is nothing harder in the world than being the parent of a kid with anxiety. You might go, oh, well, come on, it's just anxiety. But no, really, everything that I told you about what you need to do to help make the anxiety smaller, encouraging them to push their limits, is 180 degrees away from what you as a parent instinctively want to do. Your kid is in pain. They are begging you to take the pain away. And I'm telling you to say, no. Could you? I mean, if you've ever had, like, your kids got a broken leg, if I could take the broken leg and have it instead, I totally would. It wouldn't even hurt me to take the anxiety away. You know, it's like I'm saying, yeah, take that pan out of the hot oven. Yeah, I'm wearing the oven mitts, you aren't, but I'm going to just stand here and watch. That's what we are telling the parents to do. It is excruciating to do that. So when the parent is getting a text and answering, you have to recognize that what is going on emotionally for the parent is, it's as if they just got a text from the kid saying, Mom, the school is on fire. The room is filling with smoke. It's getting really, really hot, but the teacher just pretends it isn't and keeps teaching. And everyone is ignoring this. Will you come save my life? Of course you're going to come. And you're not going to call ahead because the office is just going to say, don't be silly, the school isn't on fire, because they didn't know how much pain your kid is in. You desperately want to alleviate their pain, especially because you get this added bonus. You know, we have the easier job in the school. And no matter what you say, well, no, we don't, you know, they have to deal with this 24/7. We have it during the school day. And anyone who says, oh, but during the school day, we've got the kid, they don't have it then, has never had to wait in the waiting room while their kid is having a painful procedure done in a back room. Not being right there for it does not help at all. Quite the contrary, because for all you know, the kid's not in any pain at all, but your imagination guarantees you that they are in agony every single second that they aren't right in front of you, proving that they aren't. So yeah, they've got it 24/7. They do not have an exit in sight. You know, you've got this kid might make your life really miserable for a year or two, or until they graduate or whatever. They have the kid for life. And just in case that isn't enough, probably just about everyone around them looks at them and thinks very loudly so that they can hear it, what did you do to make your kid be like this? It's your fault. And that is so pervasive that even when you know it's not true, you cannot shake it. So they've got a much harder job. They might also have their own anxiety disorder, which does not help. So we want to recognize they've got a harder job and be understanding if they can't do it all the time, and try to help them out. Start by pointing out to them how, yes, we get that you want to be helping, but this is how it actually is hurting them. The kid is scared, begs to be rescued. And then down here we get what the adult does. The adult rescues the kid. Yeah, you can stay in school, or you can stay home from school. The kid gets that rush of relief. So does the adult. Because you did what you're supposed to do. You alleviated your child's pain. Yay! You know, everybody feels great once you rescue the kid, because we're adults and that's what we're supposed to do, is rescue the kids. But the problem is the kid is learning. The kids are always learning. We can't get them to stop learning every single second of the day. And what they're learning now is you were right to be afraid. You know, it is just as scary, just as threatening as you thought it was. Look, the adults need to rescue you. You cannot do this. You have to have someone else do it for you. Next time they face that challenge or any other or similar challenge, it's going to be that much harder for them to do it. And thus the cycle gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So we want to point out to the parents that we totally understand that it is completely against every instinct in your fiber of your being to say no. But this is why you have to anyway. Start by finding common ground. Anytime you're in conflict with anyone, find anything you can agree upon. In this case, you can say, okay,
your kid in like 5 years. I might be, well, they'll be in high school. They won't be your problem anymore. It's like, yeah, but how are they going to manage high school? If every day when they wake up, you greet them with, hey, you can't hack 5th grade. Like, yeah, you're not saying that, but every time you let them stay home, every time you pick them up, you are saying, yeah, you can't hack this. We want to be helping teach them that they can hack this. Okay. We want to recognize that, yeah, giving in feels good. And this is why you want to not do it. It's okay to dodge the guilt by putting it on the school a little bit. Not like, oh, I hate that school too, but they said you have to go. But like, yeah, I wish I could let you stay home, but you've been absent so much, the school called and said you really, really have to go in today. The other really good one is you don't have the kid texting you. You have that they have to go through channels and say, okay, if you are feeling really in distress, you go to a nurse. And the nurse will decide if I need to be called. And if the kid is going to text you anyway, you either work with the school to collect the kid's phone in the morning and they pick it up at the end of the day so that they can't, or try to get the parent to have an automatic, oh, that sounds terrible, go to the nurse right now. I'll let you know when I hear from the nurse, to help refer them back to the chain of command. Because what we really want to do, we want to alleviate the agony of saying no to them, but we also want them to recognize that school can manage this. What we really want everyone to recognize is that the kid can manage this. I mean, this starts in kindergarten. You know how scary it is when you drop off your kid to kindergarten. It's scary for everyone because you're like, I don't know if they can take care of them. And the kid's looking around going, okay, I'm used to, if I've got a problem, I've got an adult on tap right here. It's a one-to-one thing, no waiting. Now there's like 20 of us and only 2, maybe 3 adults. If I got a problem, I might have to wait and learn how to manage it myself. It's a really good thing for a kid to learn. I mean, if when the parents brought them to kindergarten, if we said, okay, new plan, you're going to walk around with them all day, we would get that that's not good for anybody. So we want to make sure that they aren't doing that with a cell phone where they're walking around with the kid all day saying, I will rescue you from anything. But that the kid has to decide, can I manage this myself? If I can't, then I need to ask the nearest adult. And then if the teacher can't manage it, then they send me to the nurse. And then if the nurse can't manage it, then they talk to the social worker or they call home. And it goes through those channels, same as everything else. If the kid wakes up in the morning and says, hey, I got a stomach ache, you have to take me to the hospital, I get an appendectomy today, the mom would not say, yep, okay. They instead say, well, let me gather some more information and then I'll call the doctor and then the doctor will decide whether you need to come in and when. We let it go through adults. So we need to stop letting the kids call all the shots the moment they get to school. Okay. We also want to recognize another element in the background on this is if there are 2 parents in this family, almost guaranteed it's not going well at home. Because working on anxiety is pushing the limits as far as you can that day. At what point you say, okay, you've worked hard enough today, you'll do more tomorrow, but now you can take a break. It's a very subjective call. My daughter's OCD, it was germ focused. She could not leave because she could not open the door. She couldn't touch the doorknob to go catch the bus. It's a door. There's not a lot of hierarchy you can do with the door. It's either open or it's closed, okay? And so she's there, the bus is coming, come on, open the door. The only way to give her any exposure therapy is to come over and say, what if I don't? What are you gonna do if I don't open the door for you? So she has to mentally rehearse that as exposure before I finally go ahead and open the door for her. You can't imagine what it's like doing that, knowing that if I make her wait longer than her dad did the day before, he's the nice one. And I'm the mean bitch that left her in pain. It can shred a family. So you want to be, if you think it's awkward suggesting that their kid might need a therapist, it's really fun mentioning that you might want to get some couples counseling too, just to help deal with the fact that your kid is so desperate for rescue, they will split you actively. They will play you off of each other in order to try and get you to help them avoid their anxiety. So the key points to remember. No one likes being afraid. If you could just flip a switch and not be afraid, you'd do it. So if a person is having an anxiety reaction to something, let us assume that it is not something within their direct control, that they could just stop, because they would, okay? And thus, if you see kids kind of teasing anyone about anything, we got to shut that right down. One of the brilliant things I tripped over when I was a school nurse was I had snake day. I had a pet snake. I'd bring it in to show classes. Just like, hey, why not? And it was always fun because the kids were fascinated by it, and the teachers were about 50-50 on who had a phobia. And with the younger kids, they were in such. Because the kid there that's scared, I want to tease, but I would never tease my teacher, but she's scared too. And thus they got a real good dose of, maybe you just shouldn't tease people for being afraid of something just because you're not afraid of it. Everyone has the different things they're afraid of. I can handle a snake and not a spider. Got time later, I'll tell you how I decided to get over my spider thing. Because it's connected to snakes. And we want to also point out that even though it's very natural to want to run away from what you're afraid of, you've really got to do the hard work of not, because it will chase you and get bigger. Look at the things you're currently missing out on because anxiety is calling the shots. You would like to be able to call the shots. The shot might include, yeah, I'm not going to do that because I don't like doing that, but it's not going to be, I can't do that because the anxiety won't let me. You want to be able to make these decisions because your life gets cut off more and more and more the more you let the anxiety call the shots. We also want to emphasize that when you do face your fears, you are being brave. And you deserve credit for that. You deserve praise. You should have a parade. You probably won't. But within a little corner of people who actually get it, you're going to have that mirrored to you. So then instead of feeling like there's something wrong with me, you can kind of get that, yeah, those people are clueless over there, that they don't realize how brave I am. Something's wrong with them for not appreciating the hard work I'm doing here. Makes it a lot more likely that they'll do the hard work if they get something out of it. So, but it is really exhausting doing this hard work. Spending all day, if I have to sit through a class and I know that there was a spider there yesterday and now I have no idea where that spider is, that class is way more exhausting than it was the day before. So we want to recognize how exhausting it is to be juggling your anxiety along with everything else. The part of the body that is getting exhausted is the very part of the body that you want to be educating. It might not really be able to do both things at once. So you might really need to go a little bit easier on it. If you had a kid who's like, yes, I want to learn the times tables, but I'm also having this side gig where I'm memorizing the works of Shakespeare, you might recognize that that brain is not necessarily going to be as open to what you have to offer it. You also want to recognize that somatic symptoms are real. It is a real stomach ache, real nausea, might be real puke on the floor. And yet, you don't want to send the kid home. Because if it's not infectious, there's no reason to send them home. And there's every reason to not send them home. Because again, the brain and the body are struggling to get you to run away from that bear. Anything that works, it's going to do more. If you've got a kid where every day they are nauseous because they're anxious, every day in school is like a really long car ride with motion sickness. Imagine that. For some kids, that's what school is like all day long. And then one day they are so anxious that they actually throw up. And that's the day they go home. Yeah, they're going to throw up a lot earlier in the process in the future. Not on purpose. Okay, some of them can do it on purpose. But still, even if it's not on purpose, it's just going to happen more often. And cognitively as well. If the kid's like, I'm worried about this, I'm worried about this, I'm worried about this. And now I'm worried my mom's going to die at home when I'm not there. And that's the one that gets me so upset that I go home. Brain will go to mom dying way sooner in the process. So whatever your brain or your body does that succeeds in getting you to run away, it's going to do it more. So if that was unpleasant and you don't want it to happen even more in the future, don't let it get you to run away. So we want to help them rephrase can't into hard instead. And we want to help them explore what things they can do to feel better. Go ahead and do some doodling. Whatever might help is worth a try as long as you are honestly seeing, is this helping? If it's like, okay, and I've had teachers where they're like, yeah, they're doing that coloring thing, but I feel like they're only hearing 75% of what I say. That might be true. Have you noticed that when they're sitting there not coloring and tied up in anxiety, they only hear half of what you say? And that when they can't take it anymore and they go to the nurse's office for an hour, they hear none of what you say? 75% might be a really good starting point for progressing on this. Or if it's, Yeah, I was so much more able to be calm and focused. And then about 10 minutes later, I got distracted by what I was doing, because the class was more stressful and the colors were pretty. You say, okay, let's back up and figure out where did it become more distracting? Can we say, okay, you got your coloring book, but choosing colors was distracting you, so just bring one color. You're not trying to make art, you're just trying to color. So color every square in the coloring book in the same color. Or adjust it like that, or say, okay, well, that one doesn't work, let's find another one. You find whatever works for you that helps you be present. And you help them learn how to advocate to other people. So that if you find that, yeah, this is what really helps me feel like I can be present here. You don't have to have it be up for a vote to everyone in the room about whether or not you get to be comfortably present there. I knit. It's partially for narcolepsy, partially for ADHD, partially for anxiety. But if I want to sit in a passive listening thing like this, and we can't get people not to like generalize and say, well, if I was doing that, I wouldn't be listening, therefore I know that person's not listening. Because if I did that, I think none of you heard a word I said, because not one of you is knitting. And if I was there, I'd be knitting if I wanted to actually really listen and really take it in. Some of it is the anxiety part. There's a thing at Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. This is brilliant. It's a competitive calmness thing. You both put on helmets that measure your theta waves, that are the chill out waves. And you're sitting across, and there's a table with a tube with a marble in it that's controlled by a magnet. And you sit there and you be calm at each other. And if my brain is calmer, the marble starts to go towards the goal on her side. I'm winning, which of course excites me. So now I start losing again. So my daughter and I sit down, we put on the things, and we proceed to have 5 minutes of the most boring competition you could imagine. We're just staring at each other, and that marble is rock solid in the middle because this is me and my daughter. We are good at this. And finally, just because she wants to get done with it, my daughter says, I know what to do. And she reaches in her pocket and she takes out her music and puts on her headphones, starts listening to music. The marble starts creeping my way. I'm like, well, if you get to do that, I get to do this. I reached in my bag and took out my knitting. The moment my hands touched the fiber, sank that marble. And it's like my brain goes, ah. Oh. So it's great, but getting people to recognize that, no, I'm listening to you more can be hard. And so helping people figure out, how do you advocate for this? Starting with the fact that you deserve to be able to find a way to do this. This is not some gift that you're asking them to give you. It's just you're trying to get them to deal with reality. Depending on the audience, you might need to adjust it. It gets easier as you get older and they're less invested in saying no to you. I found it got very efficient to tell people, experience has shown that either my hands or my mouth need to be moving at all times. I think you prefer it be my hands, so I brought knitting. And then the teacher is happy to have me not in the back making everyone laugh the whole time through their lecture. So we also want to help them be actively challenging their fears, not just developing the coping strategies, by helping them get as close to it as they can. So if the kid doesn't want to give a speech, don't default to you must, or okay, do a paper. There's two mistakes to make. In our family, my husband and I divided them up and we each took one. One is that's ridiculous, you can do this, just do it. And the other is, oh, absolutely, of course you can't do this, just don't even try. Instead, you want to say, okay, doing a speech for the class is hard. How about if you do a speech just for your friends? Or do a speech for just me? Or do a speech, it's just me and I'll look away. You find how close to it can they get? And then you praise them for that, rather than it being, yeah, that's all I did, I couldn't do more. It's like, no, this is good. You're getting closer. There's a bunch of useful websites that, of course, you can't see on that, but you can click on the screen anyway. The cake thing wouldn't help you, but there's a lot of nice articles. But a lot of times, the last thing you want to do is be reading websites. So I also have videos because YouTube is a glorious thing. You can see how my day was going. There's a nice summary of the disorders, and then there's a good TED Talk, and then there's an even better TED Talk, and then there's a really good one, and then I decide I should get on with other things. So there's other things. Not very good at what anxiety feels like is sort of there, but doesn't really catch it as well as some can. What's really good is the TED Talk by a McLean clinician, because she tells a story at the beginning that totally gets you. Oh, this is what it would feel like to have anxiety all the time. So, and I really like this last one. It's a TED Talk about how to help kids not be so scared all the time by encouraging them to do more dangerous things. Because nowadays we got kids like bubble wrapped all the time. And when anything happens, the adults around react with huge reactions that do not convey to the kid at all how dangerous the thing they just tried to do was. You know, they will get the same scream from their mom, whether I'm trying to say, oh, don't do that, you might die, or, oh, don't do that, you might cause a really inconvenient mess that I will have to clean up. You know, the parent is the same intensity, whether the kid's holding rat poison or a bag of flour. It's like, yeah, we need to not do that. We need to let kids go ahead and do things that are ill-advised, not just only the safe things. And it's like one of the things he lists is, yeah, go ahead, let them try and fix that thing with crazy glue. And the kid's walking by, I'm gonna glue my toy. What do you got? Crazy glue. Is that gonna go well? I hope not. Are they gonna glue their fingers together? Almost certainly. It's not permanent. A day without thumbs is its own educational experience. They will learn that, well, that didn't go well and this kind of sucks. Maybe I should do it differently next time. Or maybe I shouldn't use crazy glue. Or maybe I should ask for help. Or maybe I should do something else because I've got this problem now that I have to deal with. There are negative consequences that are not life-threatening, but I would like to learn how to avoid them because I have to clean them up. Great thing for kids to learn. So it's a really cool, and I think he actually has a book that's like 101 dangerous things for kids to do, but he just talks about 5 of them. So people also want me to talk about apps. It's hard for me to deal with apps because I never pay for any of them and I don't have time to play with them much. But there's a few. Drawers are really good if you want to get into journaling, but not really, but only a little bit, but some. It gives you a prompt so you don't sit there staring at your journal going, I have no idea what to write. And then you could just put in one sentence, or you could go on forever, whatever you like. So that one's kind of cool and it's on your phone. Anti-stress is amazing. It is fidget toys on your phone. This should not be possible. You know, like the pillows that have like the sequins and you wipe it this way and that way it changes color? That should not be as satisfying to do on your screen, but it totally is. It's so bizarre. You know, they'll have like a squeezy ball and you poke it and it makes a squelch noise and changes. I do not know why, but I did this presentation once with some people in the back, 5 minutes later, we're like going, well, there goes my evening, you know, because they downloaded it and started playing it. So it does have some counters on some of them, which I'm not quite sure why they got that and whether that might be bad if you got someone who's getting into OCD stuff. And then Teaching Mood Tracker is really cool. It is for keeping track of symptoms. Anything that go on a slidey bar, you know, it comes preloaded with depression, anxiety, and stress, the symptoms, not the actual experience. And what you can do is set it up. Supposedly it would prompt you to go in and do an assessment, but I have yet to get that to actually work. But you go in and it asks you, you know, happy, sad, and you put the slidey bar where you are right now. Because whenever you go in to talk to someone and you'd like to say how things have been for the last week, you really end up talking about how things have been for the last 2 hours. And if you're having a bad day, you're like, yeah, this is awful, this is terrible. And it's really nice because that thing will then map these onto a graph. And you'll be able to look and say, yeah, you're having a rough couple of days, but look, overall, your symptoms have been getting lower. And even your worst day this week is better than a month ago. So it's really nice to be able to collect that. And if you go into the settings, you can set up any symptoms there. So you could set it up for a kid with ADHD symptoms if you want to be tracking those and be able to have that information when you go to do a meeting about them. You could do it on like whether you're getting your chores done, whatever. You can set it up for anything, but it does come preloaded with some that are very, very useful. So what happens now is you ask me questions about anything. If you got any cases that are less ridiculous than mine, I'd love to help you puzzle out how to manage things, past, present, future. The way consults work when people call me with a consult is I know nothing identifying about the kid. I know their age and their gender, nothing else. You don't even tell me their first name, let alone their last name, date of birth, or anything like that. And then, you know, I give you whatever information I have. And if you're calling me and I'm by my computer, I then immediately email you any of the things from the resources that would relate and be helpful for that. And if I've got time, I put in, you know, this would be a good thing to give to the parents. This would be a good thing to hang up in your bathroom for the kid to read whenever they go in to use it. This would be a good thing, you know, of how to use the different things. That's nuts and bolts of things. But does anyone have any questions? It doesn't have to be about anxiety. If you want to ask about anything else. I do have compulsive answer syndrome, so I tend to answer anything. You're welcome. Thank you.
I feel like nowadays compared to before, the kids are running the show over the parents. They're like,
Very much so.
yeah.
That's something that I've talked a lot with the nurses about. You know, back last summer when we're trying to figure out how to regulate traffic through the nurse's office when you might have an infectious kid in there. And therefore you need to know where every person is in the building at all times. And you can't have kids just kind of wandering in at random. And every parent or every nurse was, well, the teachers just send them to us. And every teacher was like, well, we have to, because if we tell Junior, no, you can't go to the nurse right now, the parent calls and yells at me. Again, back to the idea that if your kid says, you take me to the doctor right now for an appendectomy, the first thing you do is you check, do I really need to? The teacher should be able to do at least that much. You know, oh, you got a boo-boo. Well, how about you just wash your hands and I've got a Band-Aid? It's not an open gaping hole. You know, and that's what, and one thing I point out to the nurses, because people will get very into blaming each other. I'm like, do not blame the teachers because they are getting yelled at by the parents and they do not necessarily have the medical information that they would need to decide whether a kid needs to come or not. The answer is you could give them some of that information, you know, it's not cheating. So have like a rubric. And then they start giving me lists of what it would be, and it was full of jargon. I'm like, no, get rid of the jargon. Do not say significant bleeding. How are they supposed to know significant bleeding? You give them something they can understand. Enough blood to drip. If it can drip, it should go to the nurse. If it can't drip, you can wash your hands and put a Band-Aid on it. You know, if it is seizure, loss of, you know, these are the things you go to the nurse immediately for. The things that you need to go immediately for are pretty much the things that you're not sending the kid there, you're bringing the nurse to you. You know, so it's kind of a moot point anyway. Anything that they could independently go to the nurse for could probably wait a little while. And then at that point, because I then talked to a teacher friend of mine, and she's like, oh, and then it's like, and you need to check with the nurse first. It's like, you don't just show up at the doctor's office, you call the doctor's office. And the doctor says, okay, yes, I'd like to see your kid's appendicitis, and you should come in at this time. Should be the same thing, that the teacher could call the nurse's office and figure out a time when traffic patterns are amenable to having a kid come. And my teacher friend was like, oh, so I got to pick up the phone and call every single time a kid's sick. I'm like, no, at that point, this is your classroom and you can decide. And I was a camp nurse, and what they had set up there was after breakfast, after lunch, after dinner was sick call. So after that, because the dining hall was right next to the infirmary, anyone could line up and be seen by the nurse. In between those times, you know, they're out playing and they turn to the counselor and say, I got a headache, I gotta go to the nurse. They'd be like, okay, next sick call.
They use it for avoidance, the kids.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, the kids will come and say, oh, I got a headache. How long have you had it? 5 minutes. Like, it takes me 10 minutes to get to my office. How did you know to leave? That's amazing. No, but empowering the teachers to be able to say, okay, you've got a headache. You can go to the nurse at the end of this class, or after lunch, or you know, or the teacher who doesn't want to be call you a nurse all the time could turn to the kids and say, okay, raise your hand if you think you need to see the nurse. Write them all down, call the nurse and say, okay, these are the 4 kids. When do you want? Which ones? Okay, I'm going to ask you that again in 2 hours. Anytime in between, the kid's like, hey, well, tell me when I next ask. So you're not making calls every time a kid has a complaint. You're calling maybe 2 or 3 times a day, and only about the kids that manage to remember that they have a headache an hour later. Because a lot of times, you know, the number of times you have kids in line at lunch, you're like, so what do you need? And like, I don't remember, but I needed it. And it's like, okay, if you don't remember, you don't need it. You can go. And so empowering them. And then if the parents are calling up to complain, you start by having a very helpful administration who says, well, part of what we're doing is helping prepare your children for an adult world where they do not get to just walk away from their job every 30 seconds the moment they have any issue whatsoever. We're teaching them that they need to actually go through appropriate channels, ask their superior before they just leave, and that the people who are in charge get to, I mean, the friends I have who cannot book a vacation until someone gives them permission. But the kid cannot be told to wait 15 minutes to go get their hangnail looked at. So helping teach the parents that there is actually a purpose to this, that your kid learning that it is not the end of the world every time they have a boo-boo will really make your life better too, because you probably don't like them having it be the end of the world for you as well. And just helping reassure them that we got this, we understand this. I really feel bad for the schools where they have set up these systems where the teachers are texting. I hope this isn't one, sorry if I'm, but where the teachers can text the parents throughout the day, updates. Like, what were you thinking? Well, we want to have lots of communication. I'm like, yes, lots of communication is good, but that kind of communication, I mean, if you went out for the evening and you had a babysitter and the babysitter called you every 10 minutes throughout the evening, would you feel like they actually know how to take care of your child? Or would you feel like that's a real clear message of, you're right, you can't trust us. You should be hovering. You should be second guessing every decision we make. You know, when I was a kid, if you came home in trouble, the parent would be like, what did you do? Now the kid comes home, I got in trouble, and they go, what did the teacher do to you? I was like, wait, when did it stop being that maybe the teacher actually had a reason for what they said, and maybe at least I need to hear both sides? And I think part of it is that we've gotten so used to not pissing off the helicopter parents that we've trained all of them that they should be helicopters. You know, and part of it is I've had schools where it's like, if you are not adequately helicoptery, you are labeled a bad parent. You know, that's what's out there a lot, is telling people, if you are not this obnoxious, you're a bad parent. You know, same as if you let your kids walk to school, well, I guess you don't love your kids that much because mine aren't expendable. It's like, yeah, it's really not that dangerous. You know, there's really no increase in stranger abduction. There's just a big increase in kids being terrified and obesity. There might be related things going on here. But now it's like, well, if you aren't a helicopter, then you're neglecting your child's education. You know, when we first moved to Mansfield, my daughter was in 4th grade, and every day when she brought in her homework, part of it was that we were supposed to have the parent sign the agenda where the homework was written. And we had a routine where I was getting home like an hour or two after the kids. It's like, okay, you will do your homework, and when it is all done, you will get your backpack all organized, ready for the next day, and set out. And now the teacher wants us to take everything out and open it up and potentially have her not have everything. Now I'm teaching her the responsibility of taking care of this. If the homework wasn't getting done, then absolutely I would need to be doing more. But right now, she did every scrap of homework, but she did not get to do the special ice cream party for kids who did all the homework because she never had my signature. And that was not, therefore the homework wasn't good enough. And told the teacher, what is the purpose? I mean, I'm a nurse. My signature means something. What does the signature mean? Am I attesting that this is an accurate transcription of the homework on the board? Because I have no idea what was on the board. You know, I mean, what is the purpose of this? Other than making sure that I know she has homework, which I do because she told me. So, but if you aren't helicoptering like that, then you're a bad parent. So it's multifactorial, as are so many things. So it's really hard to figure out what to do to try and fix it. And part of it is, again, not looking at fixing, but a volume knob, trying to make things a little bit better. You know, if you can get a kid to wait a little bit before they go to the nurse, if you can get a parent to call the correct, you know, instead of calling and yelling at the teacher, call and yell at the principal, and then the principal can decide whether or not to yell at the teacher. You know, and having things go through, sorry if I'm adding way too much to you, but just trying to help make things be slightly better. You know, it feels like we are so much more telling kids that they cannot manage things. And from their point of view, we're God. If we say you cannot manage this, then who are they to say, yes, I can? And thus we rob them of the chance to actually manage things.
Learned helplessness.
Totally.
Yeah.
When
You see
I
it all the time.
Yeah, I first went to Peru with my son. I went back with my husband because I wanted to see the country with someone who wanted to be there. But my son and I volunteered to pretend to teach English to small children. And it was in this very poor area where all the kids are free range. So there's like a 3-year-old who might be 5 blocks from home, just kind of can be anywhere. And we'd be playing in this big open area. And I see this little, like barely not a toddler anymore, fall down. And I've got the immediate, oh, I must go and pick them up and make them feel better. Unfortunately, I was also terrified of the fact that I don't speak Spanish well enough. I should find someone who does. And that hesitation gave the kid time to have a 4-year-old come, give them a hand, they stood up, and they went off and played. I'm like, oh, yeah. If they aren't being told constantly that they need an adult to fix everything for them, maybe they don't actually need an adult to fix so many of the things for them. You know, if they aren't constantly being told that they are in pain, maybe they will actually be in less pain. Now, the other volunteers were like, these kids, they're so poor, but they're playing and having fun. It's like they don't even know that they're poor. Like, okay, step 1, don't tell them. You know, it's like, yeah, they don't have iPads. They've got tops. They've got really cool tops. They can do amazing things with these tops. Maybe we should just play with tops with them for a while. You know, yes, if we'd like them to also have adequate clothing and food. And, you know, I'm not saying poverty is great, but the things that people assume are hurting a child are totally frequently not. So I don't know how much of the fear of coming back during COVID and how much of the kids are going to be so tied into knots about everything is really because the parents tell them to be. You know, I've heard so many coverages of the various school council meetings and so on of parents being up there. You can't make my kid, it'll be terrible if my kid has to wear a mask, they'll suffer. They cannot possibly do this. And NPR played this beautiful elementary school teacher, 6 to 9-year-old students in Montana. So not where you'd necessarily expect there to be people actually wearing masks, did an audio diary of interviewing her students about how they felt about masks. You know, and one of them was just like, well, yeah, it's really uncomfortable and it's a little bit hard to breathe, but I know that it saves people's lives, so I just roll with it. So my husband and I decided whenever things are just feeling overwhelming, we just gotta look at each other and say, just roll with it. Yes, you know, and practically every kid was saying, yeah, this sucks, I hate masks. And this is why I wear them anyway. And the teacher at the end said, you know, I had no idea how much you all hated wearing masks because you never complain. You just do it. And thank you for that, because that's really good. You know, it's like, how many of their parents would be like, no, my child can't possibly be expected to wear a mask? Like, yeah, if you keep telling them they can, then they can't. Yeah, but finding it, and it annoys me when people call about people who have like an accommodation. It's like, why are all these accommodations either 100% mask or 0? If you got a kid where it's very hard for them to wear a mask, yes, it's very hard for them to wear a mask. Could they wear it maybe half an hour out of every hour? They wear it 45 minutes out of every hour. Give them some sense of, I can do something, rather than, no, you can't do anything. So, like I said, bias, lots of bias, but it's not commercial bias. So when you get to that part in the evaluation, you can complain about my biases elsewhere. It's time. Yay, we filled up the time. Thank you very much. All the papers you want to unload, put over there. If you are doing a paper evaluation, make sure you put your email address on a paper over there, preferably not on the evaluation. You know, anonymous, all that. And if you give me your email address, I'll add you to the mailing list.
Thank you very much.
So, thank you.